back to another fun video of Fabulous Cousins, and since it's World Book Day on 4th of March, I thought this video to be special. So today we're going to read the Usborne Illustrated Classics, The Secret Garden and Other Stories, in which I'm going to read The Secret Garden. Hey guys, shall I tell you a story? It's a story of an orphan girl who is sent to live in a mysterious house, where she discovers something magical, something secret. But let me start at the beginning. So we'll be reading The Secret Garden. So let's begin with Chapter 1, Country Mary. In the scorching heat of a garden in India, Mary Lennox stamped her foot. "Fetch me a drink now," she ordered. Instantly, servants rushed to obey. Meanwhile, Mary began to make a pretend garden, sticking flowers into the hot, dry earth. "It looks all wrong," she muttered. Glazing up, Mary saw a beautiful woman strolling past, surrounded by an admiring group of army officers. "Mother!" cried Mary, rushed forward, but Mrs. Lennox brushed her daughter away, as she always do. It was Mary's last glimpse of her mother. Over the next few days, a terrible fever, cholera, swept through her parents' house. Her mother and father died, along with many of their servants. Mary, shut away in nursery, never caught the cholera, but she was left all alone in the world. After that, Mary was passed around like a package between their parents' friends, until a letter came from her uncle, Mr. Cameron. "Dear Mary, I have made arrangements for you to come to England and live at the Misselthwaite Manor. My housekeeper, Mrs. Medlock, will meet you in London and escort you here. I'm afraid I won't see you for some time, as I have to travel to Europe on business. Yours sincerely, Akerchalbard Carvin." No one cares what I want, Mary thought, but she had nowhere else to go. Chapter 2, The Strange House. Several weeks later, Mary was sitting in a freezing cold carriage, opposite the stern-looking Mrs. Medlock. "What is that whooshing noise?" Mary asked, as they drove across the bleak landscape. "It's the wind howling across the moor," Mrs. Medlock replied. "What's a moor?" asked Mary. "Miles of empty land, and the manor is right in the middle of it. I hate it already," thought Mary. "How many servants will I have?" she asked. Mrs. Medlock looked shocked. "I don't know how it was in India," she said, "but here you will take care of yourself." They arrived late at night. Mrs. Medlock marched Mary across a huge hall, up steep stairs, and along twisting corridors. "Your bedroom," she announced, at last flinging open a door. "You must stay here unless you're going outside. On no account you go poking around the house." As soon as Mary stepped in the room, Mrs. Medlock left, shutting the door behind her before hurrying off. Mary looked around. It was not a child's room. Dress prizes hung over the walls, and in the middle stood a vast four-poster bed. Outside, the wind howled like a lonely person, as lonely as Mary. Then another noise pierced the wind, a far-off sobbing sound. "That's not the wind," Mary thought. "It is the child crying. Who is it?" She was itching with curiosity, but she didn't dare to disobey Mrs. Medlock. Finally, worn out from her journey, she fell asleep. Chapter 3, A Robin and a Key. Next morning, Mrs. Medlock busted into Mary's room with her breakfast. "Ugh!" she exclaimed Mary, looking at the porridge. "What is that? It looks disgusting." disgusting. I won't eat it." Mrs. Medlock sighed at the pale, skinny child stamped by the big bed. "Just drink your milk then," she said, "and you can go out." "I don't want to," retorted Mary. "Well, if you don't, you'll be stuck in here, and there's nothing to do inside," snapped Mrs. Medlock. Mary took a while to get dressed. She always had servants to dress her before, but she finally was ready. Mrs. Medlock showed her the way to the gardens, and she wandered out, past wide lawns, wintry flower beds, and trees clipped into strange shapes. The only person she could see was an old man digging. "Who are you?" demanded Mary. "Ben Weatherstaff," he growled. "What is in there?" Mary asked, pointing to the crumbling ivy-covered wall behind them. "Ah," said Ben, "that is a secret garden. Mr. Carden shut it up." "Why?" asked Mary. Ben looked sad. It was Mrs. Carden's special garden, and she loved it. But she died, and the master was so unhappy he buried the key and went away. As he spoke, a robin flew up to Ben. His wrinkled face creased into a smile. "There's no door," Ben went on, "but that doesn't stop this one." The robin cocked its head on the side and looked at Mary, enchanted. She whispered, "Will you be friends with me?" "So," Ben murmured, "you can be friendly after all. You just sound like Dicken talking to his animals." "Who's Dicken?" asked Mary. "He's the brother of the maid here," said Ben. "Dicken can grow flowers out of stones and charm the birds. Even the deer love the young Dicken. I wish I could meet him." But Ben growled, impatient. "Run along now," he said. "I've got work to do." The robin flew off. Mary followed him. "Please, Robin, show me the way to the garden," she begged. The robin chirped and hopped up and down on the ground. "He's telling me something," thought Mary. She scrabbled in the soil and saw a half-hidden, rusty ring. Picking up, she saw it wasn't a ring at all. It was a key, the key to the secret garden. Chapter 4. Dicken. Every morning, Mary jumped out of the bed, ready to search for the way into the garden. "I have the key," she told herself. "I just need to find the door." Mrs. Medlock noticed a change in her. "She looks downright pretty now, with her rosy cheeks," she thought. She was so plain and scrawny at first. One day, as the winter trees were beginning to blossom in the wind, came in a sweet-scented guest from the moor. The robin fluttered down and hopped along beside Mary. Mary never knew if what happened next was magic. A gust of wind lifted up a patch of ivy to reveal a old wooden door. Mary put her key in the lock, turned it with both hands, pushed slowly. The door creaked open. She was inside the secret garden. It was a mysterious place, a hazy, rusty tangle of roses branches that thrilled the wall and spread along the ground. Hundreds of green spiky shoots thrust up through the withered grass. "This isn't completely dead," she whispered. "I'm glad." The shoots looked so crowded that she began to clear the spaces around them. The robin chirped as though pleased. Someone was gardening here at last. Mary worked for hours. It must be lunchtime, she thought. I better go in before Miss Medlock starts looking for me. Racing back after lunch, she noticed Ben talking to a curly-haired boy with a fawn. by his side. As the boy walked away, he played a tune on a rough wooden pipe. Shyly, Mary went up to him. "Are you Dicken?" "I am," he grinned. "And you are Mary. Ben told me about you." He looked so friendly and kind, Mary felt she could trust him. "Can you keep it a secret?" Dicken chuckled. "I keep secrets all the time. If I told where wild animals live and the birds make their nest, they wouldn't be safe." "I found the secret garden," she said quickly. "I think it's mostly dead. I'm the only person who wants it to live. Come and see." She led him through the ivy curtains, and Dicken looked around amazed. "I never thought I'd see this place," he murmured. "It is like a dream." He scraped the rose branch with his pocket knife. "Here's a green underneath," he said. "These roses are alive. Some dead wood needs cutting, that's all." Mary danced around the garden in delight. "It'll be a fountain of roses come summer," said Dicken. "We'll add more plants too. Snapdragons, larkspur, love in a mist. We'll have the prettiest garden in England." "Will you really help?" asked Mary. She could hardly believe it. "Of course," he replied. It's fun, shut in here, waking up a garden." Chapter 5. A Cry in the Night. Every day they worked in the garden. "I don't want it too tidy," Mary decided. "It wouldn't feel like a secret garden then." "It's a secret sure enough," said Dicken. "Look, the robin's building a nest. He wouldn't do that unless he felt safe." "I feel safe and happy here too," Mary confided. "But I used to be angry all the time. Nobody liked me." Dicken's fawn nuzzled Mary's hand and he laughed. "There's someone who likes you," he said. "So does the robin, and so do I." That night, laying in bed, Mary heard a wild rage. "I don't hate it now," she realized. She thought of the wild animals on the moor, snuggled in their holes, protected from the blast. Suddenly, she was alert, listening. "There's that noise again," she thought. "Crying. It's definitely not the wind. There's someone. Where is it coming from?" Gripping her bedside candle, she followed the sound, down the shadowy passage, until she reached a door with a glimmer of light beneath. Quietly, she opened the door. Fire burning in the grate, she threw a dim light onto a huge carved bed. In the bed, there was a boy sobbing. Dark eyes stared from the ivory white face. "Are you a ghost?" he whimpered. "No," said Mary. "Are you?" "I am Colin Craven," said the boy. Mary gasped. "Mr. Cavern is my uncle. I'm Mary Lennox." "Well, Mr. Cavern is my father," said Colin. Mary looked at him in astonishment. "Why didn't Miss Medlock tell me about you?" "I don't let people talk about me," Colin said, "because I'm going to die." Mary was horrified. "What is wrong with you?" Colin sighed. "I'm weak." "You won't die from that," Mary scoffed. "And my father doesn't even care," Colin went on as if he hadn't heard. "He hates me because my mother died when I was born. He can't bear to look at me." "Just like the secret garden," Mary said. "What garden?" "Your mother's garden," Mary explained. "Your father shut it up after she died." "I'll have it unlocked," Colin announced grandly. "No," cried Mary. "Why not?" "Then everyone would go in it. It wouldn't be a secret anymore." Never mind, Coffin said fretfully. I'll never get to see it anyway. I'll never see it anyway. Yes, you will, argued Mary. You go outside, don't you? Never, said Colin. I can't cope with the cold air. Don't forget, I'm dying. Mary felt like he would rather proud of this than she didn't like it. Don't talk about death all the time, she said. Think of other things. Her voice dropped into a whisper. Think of the sun and the rain and the buds bursting into flower. Think of the new green leaves. Think of the secret garden coming alive. Gradually, Colin's eyes closed and Mary crept away. Chapter 6. The Magic of the Garden. Next morning, Mary had to see if she'd dream it at all. She burst into Colin's room and pulled back the curtains, flooding the room with sunlight. Colin sat up in bed and smiled. I've just realized, he said. We're cousins. They were talking so loudly they didn't hear Mrs. Medlock come in. I told you not to go poking around, she shouted at Mary. Go back to your room at once. No, Colin ordered. I like her. I want her to stay with me. She'll tire you out, said Mrs. Medlock. Come along, Mary. Do what I say, screamed Colin. Leave Mary and get out. Yes, dear, said Mrs. Medlock, trying to sound soothing. She promised Mr. Cavern she would never upset Colin. Hurriedly with her withdrew. You're horribly bossy, said Mary. I used to be like that when I lived in India, but I'm trying to change now. Why shouldn't I give orders? Snapped Colin. I'm the master of this house when father's away. Mary got up to leave. Don't go, pleaded Colin, all trace of bossiness gone from his voice. I don't want to be alone. I'll be back later, Mary promised. I have a friend I want you to meet. Few hours later, Mary and Dicken crept into Colin's room. You've been ages, complained Colin, scowling at them. Say hello to Dicken, said Mary. I want you to come out with us. I want to show you a secret. The garden? Guessed Colin. Mary nodded. I'll come, he decided, and rang the bell to summon Mrs. Medlock. I'm going outside, he stated. Bring my wheelchair. And tell everyone to keep away. Are you sure, dear? She asked anxiously. You'll catch a cold. Do as I say, Colin ordered. Dicken pushed Colin along the path until Mary stopped and, flinging back the ivy, opened the garden door. Sunshine lit up sprays of flowers and the air was alive with the birdsong. Colin stared. I can feel things growing, he gasped. It's spring, said Dicken. Makes you feel good. We'll soon have you working in the garden. But I can't even stand, Colin flattered, looking at his thin legs. It's only because you haven't tried, said Mary. Dicken helped Colin on his feet. Try now, Colin. You can walk. You really can, argued Mary. Instantly, clinging to Dicken, Colin forced his weak limbs to move. The others saw his pale face grow into rosy in the sunlight. Mary, Dicken, he cried. I'm going to get well. I can feel it. It's now time for the final chapter, Chapter 7. Mr. Carvin comes home. Every day they played and worked in the garden, and every day Colin grew stronger. By the time spring turned into summer, he was completely well, but the three of them had to still pretend that he was still ill. No one must know, Colin insisted. I want to surprise my father. If only he'd come if he'd come home. Colin began to wish. Come home, come home. One night, Colin's father, far away in Italy, had a strange dream. He heard his dead wife calling his name. Where are you? He pleaded. In the garden, came the reply, like the sound from a golden flute. Mr. Cavern woke up and determined to return home to his manor at once. Where's Colin? He demanded. The minute he arrived home, Mrs. Medlock gasped, shocked at his sudden appearance. He plays in the garden, sir, with Mary and Dicken, she said in a shaky voice. No one is allowed near them. In the garden, thought Mr. Cavern, my dream. As he hurried down the path, he heard children laughing in his old wife's garden. The door's locked and the keys buried, he told himself. I must be still dreaming. Suddenly the door burst open and Colin and Mary dashed out. Father, you're here, cried Colin. Mr. Cavern hugged his son tight. Is it really you? You're well. However did it happen? It was the garden, said Colin, and Mary. I thought the garden would be dead, murmured his father. It came alive, said Mary. Mr. Cavern smiled, and so has Colin. He said, Thank you, Mary. Oh, hey guys! Did you guys enjoy the story? And if you did, don't forget to like, share and subscribe Family Cousins. And to hear more of these fun and exciting stories, also for that you have to ring on the notification bell, okay? And until our new fantastic video, we'll see